For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. Oh, I love that verse. You know what that tells me? Fear does not come from God. So, you know, people will argue with me whether or not God makes someone sick, or whether God takes away money from people. But there's one thing you should be sure. God does not give fear. The Bible is very clear. God hath not given us a spirit of fear. So if you have fear, then it's not from God. In fact, God did not wire you for fear. I like that phrase, wire. You know, I go to Europe sometimes, and when I take my laptop, I have to make sure we have the right outlets, because the circuits in Europe is going to be different. It's wired different than my laptop. And if I try to make it work, it's not going to work. And so I'm not wired for fear. God, when he created me, did not make me so that I can handle fear. That fear is a normal part of life. No, I am wired for faith. I'm attached to God, and I'm supposed to trust in him. And the opposite of trust is fear. So when I quit trusting in God, God's goodness and his love, then I'm operating in fear, and fear is going to break down my life. I can't continue to have fear. It's going to break me down even physically. You know, Jesus said, men's hearts shall fail them for fear. Now, I know that he doesn't necessarily mean it literally, but I heard one story about these underclassmen. They were initiating this freshman in a fraternity, and so they blindfolded this freshman, and they took him out, and he didn't know where they were going, but he heard some trains go, so he knew he was coming near some trains. They end up blindfolding him, and they laid him on a track, and he was tied to the track, and he could feel the metal track, and he could hear some trains, you know, that he's on the train. All of a sudden, he started screaming, "Get me out of here, guys! This is not funny!" And they're all laughing. They tie him, and all of a sudden, the freshman could hear a train coming. Well, what he didn't know is the train was on the other set of tracks, not actually on his. But he could hear it, and he's blindfolded, and he can hear the train coming, and he's screaming, get me out, please!" And he's crying out for mercy. And all of a sudden, the train passes right by, and of course, doesn't chop him up since it's on the other track. And the men afterwards, they come out laughing, and they say, "Oh, wasn't that funny?" And he was found dead. He suffered a heart attack. Now, fear can do that to you. You may not die over today, but you let fear come into your life, it produces stress. Now, there's only one kind of fear that you need, and that is the fear of the Lord. That's it. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." The only fear we need is the fear of God. And what that really means is that we respect his laws. If he says that don't do this because I love you and I don't want bad things to happen to you, then if you fear him, you say, "You're right, Lord, I'm going to believe you. I'm not going to do the wrong thing because you know bad things will happen." That's the fear of the Lord. You know what's amazing to me? Is you got people who'll have all sorts of phobias and fears, but then they won't have any fear of God. The only fear you need in life is the fear of the Lord, because it's the beginning of wisdom. So I'm not saying that all fear is bad. I mean, there is this element, what I call caution, where it is based on the fear of the Lord, where you are concerned about bad things, or you doing bad things, or bad things happening, and that you work at solving it. Let me illustrate it this way. My little boy, actually he's not my little boy anymore, but Justin, when he was little, he had an infection in his eye. And so we went to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh my goodness, I am so glad you brought him in here." A lot of parents would just, think it's going to get better. Thank you for bringing it. Now, why did we bring him? Because there was a concern. This is not the same as a fear that hath torment, that the scripture says. This is a good kind of fear that protects us. You see? So we went and took him to the doctor. The doctor prescribed and said, "Man, I'm so glad you took him, brought him here. This was a serious infection that if left untreated, we would have had to operate and take his eye out." Man, my heart sunk. I said, "Well, man, I'm glad we brought him here." So he said, "Here, take this medicine. Your son should be better. Within 2 days, you should notice the pain going down, leaving within about 24 hours to 48 hours. I can't remember exactly the time, but I said, "Okay." Well, we got the medicine. Justin started taking it, and still he had the pain. The swollen was still there after 48 hours. Now, if I walked around saying I'm not supposed to have any fear at all, then I would have said, hey, everything's going to be better, right? But this is a good kind of fear that leads me in what we call a cautious lifestyle. So I went to the medicine, and I looked at the expiration date, and it said it expired that day. Well, I don't want any medicine that expires even close to my day. So I went down to the pharmacist and said, look, this expired today. I want some new medicine. Oh, Mr. Brown, today doesn't really mean today. It's still good for a while. I said, I don't care. I'm buying medicine that doesn't expire today. So they exchanged it. I gave it to my son, and the swelling went down immediately. The pain was gone. Well, I'm saying, as a parent, I'm concerned for my children. And if you're not concerned for your children, you're going to endanger them in things. So we're not talking about living a life where you don't show some concern, some caution, some protection. You know what I'm saying? If you're having heart problems and you don't go see a doctor, that's stupid. You understand? You do things. I'm not talking about that kind of good fear. I'm talking about a fear that torments your life, a fear that is irrational, a fear that starts to destroy the abundant life that Jesus Christ came to give you. And that fear we don't have to have. And how many of us have this irrational fear? And can I say, sometimes the fears may seem rational, but it's not. The fear of water. Well, I'm afraid of drowning. Well, then swim. Oh, I've never learned to swim. Well, then swim. Yeah, but what if I drown? You're not going to drown if you learn to swim. Did you know no one is born knowing how to swim? We all have to learn it. Oh, but the water. Oh, oh, oh. It's irrational. You're not going to drown. Afraid of germs. Well, germs are real. I'm not going to shake people's hands. So now you're going to not be courteous because you're afraid. See, what's wrong is we have this irrational fear of crowds. For some of you, this is a big problem right now because you're here with all these people, fear of closed situations, fear of heights, whatever. What's irrational? But here's the question. Where do our fears come from? The boogeyman. Well, you're not too far off. Okay, now I'm going to share something that's going to really make a lot of sense to you. God hath not given us the what? Spirit of fear. Romans chapter 8, verse 15. Romans 8:15, what does it say? For you did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave again to fear. So notice these two passages call fear a spirit. Now, most people, when they think of fear, they think of it as an emotion. Are you ready for this? Fear actually is not an emotion. Fear affects the emotions. See, since it affects the emotions, we assume that it originated out of emotions. So my fear came out of my emotions. No, it did not. Your emotions did not create the fear. The fear created your emotions. According to the scriptures, fear is a spirit. Fear is demonic. Now, you ready to know where fear comes from? Fear comes when the devil speaks words into your mind. One of the revelations that the Bible tells us is that the devil, not only is he real, but are you ready for a revelation about what the devil is what do you think he primarily does? Well, he picks people with his pitchfork. No. Can I tell you what he really does? The devil talks a lot.